Welcome everyone to this session. My name is Melissa Bunkaris. I work at UTS here for the Institute for Sustainable Futures and will help chair this session today. So this session is the Power Systems, Pacific Island Women-Led Innovation to Disaster Risk Reduction. And today we'll have a panel of speakers with us, two of whom are here with us in the room. So we have here to my left Carol Ungear, who's the ActionAid Australia Deputy Head of Programs and Humanitarian Lead, and Tasrina Chowdhury, who works at the Institute for Sustainable Futures with me and is a Senior Research Consultant. Online, we will also have Carolyn Kittione, who works as the Shifting the Power Coalition Regional Representative, and Flora Varno, the Country Director for ActionAid in Vanuatu. So there they are. Lovely to see you both, Carolyn and Flora. I'd firstly just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're joining on today. We're on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging, and extend that to anyone of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander heritage in the room today. Obviously with NAIDOC Week, it's a really powerful time to reflect, and I think this session will give us lots of opportunity as well to reflect on the theme of NAIDOC Week around strength, vision and legacy. So I will not talk any longer and I'll pass it over to this wonderful team of ladies. And it's over to you, Carolyn, to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and Bulubanaka, everyone. I do apologize that I'm not able to be there, but I trust that even past this session, you will be able to connect with Flora, Carol, and Q, of course, to be able to understand more about what it is that we do as the Shifting the Power Coalition. So again, thank you for joining us this afternoon on this learning exchange on Pacific-owned women-led early warning and resilience systems, or as we like to call it within the coalition, power systems. My name is Caroline Kittiane, and I do work with the Shifting the Power Coalition as its regional representative. I coordinate the regional hub of the coalition. And while we're based in Fiji, we do have partners working across 7 Pacific Island Forum countries. I'm going to be moderating this session, but there is a panel of, as we heard Mel say, there's a panel of Pacific feminist humanitarian experts on this call. So I'll try not to take up as much time speaking because I do want to respect the fact that you'll also have questions for our panel. And so in this session, we will hear from these experts about how Pacific women are leading innovative community-centered solutions to the climate and disaster crisis. We'll take a look at the work of the Shifting the Power Coalition and share some insights from groundbreaking research that's being conducted with a team from UTS's Institute for Sustainable Futures. And in speaking on that, also highlighting the transformative impact of women-led early warning systems across the region. We're hoping to do this session in 3 parts. One is just me giving a background on who we are as a coalition. Part 2 will be me handing over to our expert panel to speak more about the work that they're doing around women-led early warning systems. There are a couple of videos that we would like to play, and that'll be controlled by the team that's there in the room. But then we will circle back to our third part around Q&A. We do know that there will be some questions on the research that we're presenting, but also perhaps you'll want to know more about the work that's being done in Bougainville, Vanuatu, and Tonga. We do acknowledge that our Tongan partners aren't able to join us on this call, but there is a short video, and if there are any questions you may have further for our partners at the Talitha project, please feel free to reach out to us or send us your contact details so that we may also follow up on email. Thank you for the slide control, and I do want to acknowledge the tech team that's doing this. But to get straight into it, the Shifting the Power Coalition partners really came together in 2016. So it's been 10 years of us working as a coalition. And we really came together to address the exclusion of Pacific women's voices in decision-making on climate change and disaster response. And although it's really only been 10 years for the coalition, our partners have actually been working together long before that in different ways to address gender equality and women's rights. But it was really the impact of tropical cyclones Pam in 2015 and tropical cyclone Winston in 2016 that solidified the need to come together as a coalition to address the lack of women's representation within the humanitarian architecture in the region. And so when TC-PAM it affected Vanuatu in 2015 and TC Winston in 2016, we recognized that the response and the post-disaster assessments weren't actually meeting the needs of diverse women and girls because the response teams weren't speaking to women and girls. And even as we came together to review the response systems, those who were invited to the table did not represent the network or the groups that were most affected during these disasters as well. The coalition is really the only regional feminist network that's dedicated to advancing diverse Pacific women's leadership in humanitarian and climate action. And we're bringing together 13 women-led civil society organizations, including the Pacific Disability Forum, to reach over 100,000 women across our partner countries, from Fiji and Vanuatu to Tonga and Bougainville. And it was really important for us to partner with the Pacific Disability Forum at our inception because we understand that even within the feminist network, we had to look around the room to see who wasn't with us and who needed to be there and how we could support that intersectional approaches taken by our partners. And as a feature of our work and principle, feminist agenda, and we want to make sure that women with disabilities and young women are at the forefront of disaster preparedness and response. The next slide, please. I'm going to assume that the slide has changed. Yes. This is why, as part of our advocacy as well, we're always after appropriate and accessible technology. The screen's just gone blank for me, but I'm assuming we're on slide 3. As Pacific Islanders, we're no strangers to disasters. We know from multiple literature review, but also from our own experience that Pacific women face disproportionate risks during disasters because of existing inequalities, such as unpaid care burdens, limited access to technology, and rising gender-based violence. Anyone working in the development or CSO space already knows this. But as a coalition, our advocacy is driven by the commitment to elevate and amplify women's leadership to multiple crises. So in 2022, together with UNDRR, we released a report on women-led multi-hazard early warning systems that really speaks to how Pacific women are blending traditional knowledge with modern tools, or at least tools that are accessible to them. So we launched Power Systems that year. It was really a women-led early warning mechanism that strengthens the capacity of women in climate literacy, giving women the opportunity to be able to interpret the weather data and forecasts that are coming out by their Bureau of Meteorology or even their climate change departments, but also an opportunity to share back to these same stakeholders what they're seeing and understanding in observing their environment. It was also about strengthening the use of existing technology to be able to send out SMS alerts, again, in the way that makes sense to women on the ground. But it was also an opportunity for us to take this information that we're observing from our communities, from the work that we're doing, and using that same technology to be able to advocate and shape disaster policies. And this has been very evident from the work that ActionAid Vanuatu has been able to do in country, and even early partners such as FemLink to be able to shape the Fiji humanitarian systems as well. But this was also a way to integrate Indigenous practices into some of these resilience strategies. And as we start to shape those policies, or at least advocate for these policy changes as well, to ensure that Indigenous Pacific women are also at the forefront, that recognition is given to them, and allowing for the investment of Indigenous practices to shape policy language as well. And so building on from the work of FemLink Pacific's Women's Weather Watch model, which was an interoperable two-way communications and information system. This was then adapted to Women Weta in Vanuatu and Marigot Power in Bougainville, which has proven that when women lead, entire communities can become safer and more resilient. Can we move to the next slide? Again, I'm just going to assume that we've moved to the next slide. The screen is blank for me, but I trust that the technology is working that side.
It's working. We've got you on the next slide, Carolyn. Sorry, you can't see it.
Algie, again, going by faith, this is trust in the system. It's always going to be about, for us as a coalition, always about learning and investing in women-led innovation. We aren't just creating new projects, but supporting and understanding, really listening to women at the community level about what it is that they need and how it is that we can support them at the regional level. And so to strengthen our understanding of these efforts on the ground that's led by Indigenous Pacific women, we partnered with the Institute for Sustainable Futures to study 3 quick questions. What are the outcomes that Women Weta has achieved in Vanuatu? The factors that enable women-led early warning systems in Bougainville and Tonga, but also what are the priorities that can accelerate and scale these models in other countries as well. And so this research that's grounded in feminist intersectional methodologies combined those literature reviews, the ability to organize talanoes with our communities and workshops with local women leaders. And we'll actually hear about that later in the panel discussion when Tesrina takes us into a deeper dive into the process and the findings that's come out of that piece of research. But for right now, I do want us to turn and really understand the stories that's come out of this set of work through power systems, through the work of ActionAid Vanuatu and the Marigot Power Systems in Bougainville. And so I'd like us to deepen our understanding of where women Wetas come from. And here to speak on that is Flora Vano, who is the country program manager of ActionAid Vanuatu. Flora may not be a stranger to many of us who are in this call. And for us, within the Shifting the Power Coalition, we know Flora to be a very passionate activist for women's rights, not only in Vanuatu, but she's also a respected mentor and advocate for Pacific young women's engagement in the climate and disaster spaces. And Flora, I know that we have the slide on the screen, but as an introduction, I think we'd love to really just hear from you because you've been there from the very start of Women Weta. Tell us that origin stories of Women Weta. Why was this model even established? Tell us about the journey of Women Weta since its inception and what does it look like years on from that start? So over to you, Flora.
Thank you, Tomas, and hello, Olgeta. Thank you, Caroline. Woman Weta. I love the topic because it always reminded us the day that we thought we knew how to communicate, but we learned from our sisters back in Fiji, our sisters from FemLink, and I think Caroline have said it really well. Now, why the model Woman Talk Together or Woman Weta established? Now, Woman Talk Together is the network that we had in Vanuatu. And one thing we have seen from the communication model is the government is talking, the medias are talking, but the women don't own radios, the women don't own phones back then. Communication only comes in one stream. It only leads the community leaders. It never reaches the women. And that was a very practical example from Tropical Cyclone Pam when the communication was coming in. Everybody thought it was clear sky, no clouds. The sun was shining, but they were telling us it was a category 4 coming through. Communities were thought it was normal. That was just something from the radio. The male who has the radio knew it. The community leaders knew it, but they thought there's a ritual we're saying, we call it tamafa. The men will go and drink kava and do the tamafa, so they spit out and call the cyclone to shift. So yeah, And they thought that practice will actually work for this cyclone, but it never did. And it hit us hard. A lot has lost livelihood, has lost their homes, their garden, their livestock, everything that the women thought it will keep safe. It didn't, and in that case, it bring food security, well, food insecurity, gender-based violence, intermediate partner violence. You name all that violence that women face from that day when they got hit by the cyclone until during and after the cyclone. So one of the key things that we wanted to establish through that is the communication from the meteorological services right down to the women. How does that look like? And how can we assist the women to get the information? So woman weather from that model, it was very high level when we look at it. It was all community radio, but because in Vanuatu, women don't own radio, so we have to work with what we have. And the structure that we built on was to have that model working, we need to have the existence of a network. We need to know that that information will reach the last mile. How would it reach the last mile? So the setting up of Women in Talk Together was set up, and so the model of Woman Weather, when it comes through, it actually follows the same one process down, and from down it follow it right up. So it's a two-way. Now government use it now. How do we include the diverse women into that platform? Now, women with disability, different impairments need different approaches. I am sending them SMS message through the hub from VMGD to the hub, from the hub to the correspondent, from the correspondent to the focal points, which is the task force, to the sister leaders who reaches to the members. And those who don't have a handset, we will make sure that the women that got the handset will walk from one place and pass it on to the next. How do we include disability? If the impairment doesn't allow the disability to access information by SMS, then we will make sure the caretaker is involved in the phone tree network. So building an inclusive communication system means also addressing some of the different impairments that the disability had in communities. We don't have a national sign language, it's just home sign, but it is crucial to make sure that the data that we have actually mapped out where the disabilities are, to involve them, where the single mothers are, make sure we involve them where the widows are, and keep the data up to date. We have seen a lot from our responses that when we do data, we always miss, a lot of the vulnerable marginalized groupings are left out. Why? Because the communication, they were not briefed, they were not informed. Now, Woman Weather, it was very successful as well because of the data that we keep on updating. Every month we update data. We know, okay, this woman married to this community, we have to include her. Does she have a disability? Yes, no. So this is ongoing on the side. To maintain the sustainability of this model, we also need to update phone tree. The contact numbers have to be relevant. If the network is not working, let's go to the network providers and ask them why is it not working. So it's a whole cycle of maintaining the flow of communication and the structure. So how does government work with the network? Now, on our normal system, we've got the system that government put in the community. We called it the Community Disaster Climate Change Committees. And that system, that one links to the provincial, that links to the national NEOC, National Emergency Operations Center. We are part of the CTCCC, we are part of the provincial one, and then we are part of the national. Which sector are we looking at when we talk about part of where Women Weather sits? We sit inside the communication cluster because it's an early warning system. Therefore, the government uses that platform also to disseminate information to the communities. So if we wanted to only target one section of the island or just 3 or 4 islands, they will come to Woman Weather and say, okay, Woman Weather, this platform, we want message from health, we want message from any water department, we want messaging from logistic to go to this particular area, because that's what the message is going for. And then we disseminate the information. So it is also a system that the community have known. They have seen it, they have worked with it. On normal time, we put in emphasis on campaigns, awareness through that platform. But on disaster, it became a trusted network. So if any other women passing information that they know she is not a focal point, the message will be the information is coconut wireless news, not the real one. So we know that those are the information holders. They have the phones. They're the ones that are allowed to pass on information. Has it been impact? What's the impact on, the whole gender responsive, inclusive disaster preparedness? The impact is we got women leading at the front line. Disability women sitting inside some of those clusters, the gender cluster, the nutrition cluster, the health cluster, the evacuation cluster, comms cluster. So we were all around those clusters just to make sure that information from Woman Wet'em Weather can be passed on and reach everybody. And so we include each woman into those platforms in order for them to voice their concern, say if the data is valid, validation of data, the assessment that they were making, the gender analysis that they bring to the table. So all this happened because we've got that model that speaks to government, work with government, and also speaks to the community, work with the community, and it saves lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Flora. And I do want to just put out there to all those who may be interested in hearing more from Flora, you will have the opportunity to do that, but we will be hosting Q&A after all our panelists have spoken. So please do hold on to your questions. But there have been some key lessons as well from what Flora has shared with us, particularly around building and supporting that network of women to be able to shape what early warning systems should look like. And then there's that influence again around government systems that's being informed by the evidence of work that women like Flora have been doing on the ground. I do also want to make note, because I've heard Flora speak to this, and the work that Flora is doing has also influenced, or rather given us an insight into how this model can be supported in other contexts as well, is the fact that because Flora is a Nivan woman working with her community, she isn't just working in the communities that's closest to her. She's also been able to utilize her kinship relationships, which is anyone who works in Pacific contexts or still is connected to the indigenous systems of relationship building will understand it's about always connecting back to who it is that you know by using your kinship relationships. And that's one of the reasons that Flora has been such a mentor to us, because it's always telling us to go back to what already exists rather than just creating networks out of nowhere. Thank you so much, Flora. I know that we have a couple more questions for you. We'll hear from the audience in a little bit, but we'll take a pause there, Flora, because I'd now like us to go to Carol. For those of us who are in the room with Carol, please go. Feel free to ask her as many questions as you want while she's there in the room, because Carol isn't just the Deputy Programs Manager at ActionAid Australia, who just happened to be a co-founder of the coalition, but she also provides technical advice to the coalition on feminist humanitarian response. And I feel like Carol's making faces at me right now. Carol, we'll meet each other soon again. You can give me feedback later. But what I think we'd all like to understand in this space while we have you here, Carol, is what's the gender transformative and inclusive impact of women-led early warning system? What makes this unique? And what is the work that needed to be done in Papua New Guinea to be able to set up Marigot Power, Marigot Information? Over to you, Auntie Carol.
Is it? Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Caroline. I will talk with you later. But this is a great opportunity to reflect back, because way back in 2015, I was given the responsibility to go and work with the women in the Pacific to start our work on women-led disaster response. women-led humanitarian action, and also start nurturing the work on DRR and climate change. So when I reflect from where we started and how we built this work, the one common factor that presents in all countries is there's a constituency of women. It just doesn't start anywhere. And that constituency of women was the strength we used to establish the early warning systems, multi-hazard early warning systems. And whereas also proudly we note that it started with FemLink Pacific, so it was a Pacific women-led innovation, that the Pacific women have been able to adapt it suitable to their contexts. And that is why it has had deep impact. So in Vanuatu, they didn't do it exactly the same way as in Fiji. When we started in PNG, it was slightly different, and Tonga now it's slightly different, adapting to contextual realities. And that meant that it is accepted locally, they connect with it, and it can move fast. The one thing that also has been noted, when the women touched the phone for the first times in their hand and when it was introduced, it was a very emotional moment because some of them had been married early. They dropped out of school. Some of them were hearing text messaging, like in Vanuatu, I'm talking about Vanuatu, but they were able to send the first texts in their lives. And they realized they could still write in English, because the first tests that came out in English, and then we worked together for them to write it in Bishlama, which is their local mode of communication. And that's the one thing that the self-esteem for women who are members in the network of the multi-hazard early warning system are looked at with high esteem in their communities. They're respected by their village administrators, the elders, their own male, the spouses and their kids, because they are the ones who hold phones. And the phones that they're working with across the system, they're smartphones. And therefore, they're able to connect with the rest of the world as well. They're able to read through Google what is happening. They're able to know more about the disasters and all that. It therefore then elevates when you look at MGI, when you look at Tonga Win, and then coming back to women's wet weather, it elevates women's knowledge around disasters, around climate, around anticipatory action, because they're able to read and learn from the others. They're able to communicate with other sisters from other countries who they've met in various fora. I also want to acknowledge the fact that the impact for this multi-hazard warning system has been a paradigm shift, where people talked about climate change as a very technical issue, and most men who are elite were on the tables discussing climate change. This has enabled local Pacific women to talk climate change in their own way with facts. And that has earned them a lot of respect, but also breaking the gendered, the barriers that, women cannot talk climate. The other thing I want to highlight in terms of impact is that this mechanism has enabled the local women to engage with climate services more directly, which is very technical and would never reach out to such women, and also the humanitarian architecture. And I want to give an example of Vanuatu when we had the recent Port Vila earthquake, and they needed key messages to go out to the population about 10 hours later. The only mechanism that could be used was women wet and weather. And Flora sat and worked until 2 a.m. getting key messages from all clusters that was disseminated to the Port Vila population. And I found that very strong and powerful, and was proud that something that we started lightly was now being recognized and utilized. I won't be long. So the multi-hazard early warning system is also an avenue for women-led community-based protection and protection in general, community-based protection, because they are well prepared, they know what's about to happen, and they look at issues and factors that would lead to their safety, security, dignity, and rights. What do we need to do to make sure that we don't stay in this house because this roof is going to be blown off? What do we do to store our food? How do we store clean and safe water? What happens to the women's, not women, the family documentation? In TC Palm, when we came, most of them had lost their marriage certificates, the birth certificates, the school reports, and all that. But through this mechanism, they have now established what we call the women's handbag, where they keep all their family documentation safe. And when they know that there's a huge cyclone coming, they move it from the house to a safe location. We now talk anticipatory action, new lingua, new what we are all focusing. Multi-hazard early warning system is the first step for us in anticipatory action. It is what enabling you to know what's about to happen, how to prepare, and what to put in place to better prepare. So when we talk about the women-led anticipatory action, for us, women, weather is the initial step. Just before I talk about MGI, what's unique about the multi-hazard early warning system in the Pacific? It enables diverse Pacific women to engage. You're talking about women with disability, you're talking about a single woman, indigenous women, widows, and all sorts of women are able to engage. And one thing I want to highlight is that the challenge we still have within this mechanism is it is not really adapted fully 100% to serve women and persons with disability. So when there are people who cannot read and write because they're blind, we are yet to talk about how this would happen, how the deaf would engage and all that. So we are they're using locally led approaches like the carer to translate and communicate in the best way possible, but literacy amongst disability is also a huge challenge. But this is the starting point. They use new technology, smart tech. Also through radio, they're able to engage and communicate in public confidently on what's about to happen, like in Tonga Win. But there's also a feedback loop where women then communicate back to the hubs what they've heard the community saying or what the others are saying about the information that has just been shared. And this feedback loop, the information that comes from women, then the team leads take it to the National Disaster Management Planning teams, and it is taken as reliable first-hand information. This has been a process. It's been investment, but it's unique in its own way, and it is groundbreaking. And when we started, they were saying it's just phones. Now, when something happens, they ask, have you seen any message from Women, Wet and Weather? Let's go to MGI. Now, we started, the work started in Femlink Pacific, and then Vanuatu adapted. And when COVID-19 affected us in 2020, and PNG was very hard hit, and we were asked to see how best we could support response in PNG. One of the safest, fastest way to respond was application of a multi-hazard early warning system and a feedback loop. And we then consulted with our sisters in PNG and through Bougainville Women's Federation, who thought that was very strategic. And through the guidance of shifting the power, we were able to design with them the model that was going to work in Bougainville. And it entailed having handsets. It entailed establishing messages, key brief messages that they established and put in a bank. So say, for example, if there's vaccination, which was a huge challenge at that time because there was rumors and misconceptions around vaccination in PNG. There was also a challenge of moving from point A to B. Women were being blamed for witchcraft and all that. And this mechanism helped them to communicate factual information around COVID-19. It is real, it's there, it's a pandemic. We were able to work effectively with Digicel and the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health reviewed all the information and signed off before it was disseminated. As a result, this mechanism enabled Bougainville Women's Federation to reach 1.2 million people. I want to emphasize that at that time, Bougainville did not work just with older women. The younger women and women with disability were also very actively involved in the process, and they were able to reach, and there was a strong feedback loop. When a message was not clear, we would get something, I would get it on my phone instantly saying, revise the message, it's not clear. Digicel would tell us that immediately. But it was not a cheap process. It was quite expensive. We got funding to start up this from DFAT. I'd like to acknowledge that, who trusted it because of the success of the other systems. And that worked well. But this has enabled Bougainville to strengthen their work on women-led protection as well and disaster risk reduction. And it's something we are working with them to deepen in adjustment to the, the current situation that we are in. Again, I think a video will be played, but before then, I just want to highlight that the latest girl in the scene is Tonga Win, and Tonga Win was started at the background of Talitha project. Talitha is a women project supported by various feminist leaders in Tonga. And it is a member of Shifting the Power Coalition, but has been actively involved in disaster response. I think it's because of an earthquake that they were able to see how best to work and thought it was an opportunity to establish this. They are using radio to communicate, so the young women, are putting key messages together and communicating to the public to be better prepared, or facts around the response, or where services can be sought, in working in close collaboration with the disaster management organization that they already work with, and the persons with disability they already partner with. And these relationships have been built before this was established. The one thing I would like us to take home is that this mechanism allows us to engage with the national disaster management apparatus, but important that we also learn what is going on. Relationships are built, strategic partnerships, and feedback that can be used to strengthen this program. Ki, would I stop there to allow you to, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Carol. We skipped ahead to this slide. This was your opening, and we'll get back to that in a sec, but perhaps we should move into the video. And to introduce the video as an example of how we're learning from each other within the coalition and adapting best practices in implementing women-led warning systems, women-led early warning systems, we'll first hear from Barbara Tane, who is president of the Bougainville Women's Federation, on the implementation of Marigot Power, Marigot Information, or the MGI initiative, which, as Carol said, was adapted from Women Weta during the COVID-19 crisis. And then following that, we'll hear from Vanessa Helata, who is the executive director of the Talitha project in Tonga, where we get to hear from her on how Tonga Wind, or the Tonga Women's Information Network for Disasters, actually emerged following the 2022 Hunga Tonga Ha'apai volcanic eruption. And the response from Talitha project in integrating its young women mentors and radio partnerships to ensure that gender-responsive disaster management approach, including outreach to persons with disabilities in the outer island. So now we'll hear from Barbara Tane, and over to the tech team to play the video.
We've already mobilized our communities, stakeholders, in which we have already identified the 20 women we will be working with the power system. And when we were doing the community mobilization, we these participants or 20 key women leaders we will be working with were identified by their chiefs in the communities, and they are also elected women leaders in the community government. While we were doing the community mobilizations, we also identified the 3 key communities whom we will be working with, particularly for the engagement of the power system that we will be having. And they have identified Torokina and Wakunai district, and we selected one other community within the Atolls district, Carteret Island.
And if we could also play the next video, which is a recording of Vanessa Helata at the recent global platform on disaster risk reduction.
So the Tonga Wind project in Tonga, we're focusing on a community named Lapaha. It's located in the eastern side of Tonga Island. So we're building a youth hub. His Serene Highness Prince Galanivalu has kindly donated a 1 acre of land for this youth hub. So we have got all our, I want to acknowledge the TFED here for their kind support. We have got all our building materials and our containers, 40 foot containers, all on the land, but we're still waiting for the map because we cannot build a fence because of security reasons. We don't want people to come and steal our building supplies when we start building. And so we're still waiting for that. But in the meantime, we're training 15 youth in Lapaha community, 12 young women and 3 young men to profile. And we want to make this program as practical as possible. So we set down the 15 young people and we asked them what do you want to do. So what they have been doing in the last year, they have profiled the Lapaha community, identify safe areas and unsafe areas and also housing. And we were privileged to have to get some funding support from Habitat for Humanity New Zealand, where these 15 young people went around the Lapaha community and identify all this unsafe housing, particularly for people with disabilities and elderly, because in Tonga we really respect our elderly people. So if you go to our Talitha project Facebook, we have all the information there. So last month, we had the young people identified 4 housing, 3 disabilities, and 1 elderly woman, where we renovated their housing. And this is all to minimize the risk. When disaster happens, people with disabilities don't have to leave their homes. So what we have done, we have put in new ramps and for them, because some of them have never left the house.
Yes, that is the end of the video. And I just wanted to provide more context into the work that Talitha Project is doing. As Vanessa emphasized during the video, the role of its youth mentors in strengthening communities' resilience is exactly why the Talitha Project have been working to establish youth hubs to ensure that young people have the space to develop, lead, and have discussions on their own priorities when it comes to responding not just to the climate disasters, but also to across multiple priorities as well. And so while the construction of the youth hub is still in its early planning stages, there has been work done that's gone ahead on the renovation and remodeling of one of the halls at the local college to be an art hub for the students, to be a meeting space for young people from the community, and providing that safe space as well for them to have the discussion that they would not otherwise be able to have anywhere else. Now move on to the next speaker, who is an incredible young woman that we've worked with previously and who we've just loved working with because she's incredible and very knowledgeable about the work that we've done as a coalition and along the research that's happened in this space as well. But Tazrina Chowdhury holds a PhD in disaster resilience and works as a climate change and disaster resilience researcher at the UTS's Institute for Sustainable Futures. She has collaborated with multiple Pacific organizations and has traveled to Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomon Islands, where she's previously collaborated with ActionAid Vanuatu as well to explore the economic benefits of women-led early warning systems in that country. As an extension of that work, Tazrina is also currently co-leading the research on power systems and the impact of women-led early warning systems in Vanuatu, Tonga, and Bougainville. Tazrina, thank you for accepting our invite to be part of the panel. Perhaps as an introduction to the room as well, please provide us with an overview of the research process, particularly the key findings to date and what's come out of that in terms of the learnings for future work. Over to you, Tazrina.
Thanks so much, Caroline, and thank you for marking me as young woman. I think I will start with a small story. So my PhD is in, as Caroline mentioned, in disaster resilience, and I looked into women's lived experience living in the cyclone shelters in Bangladesh. I have this passion for women and disaster and how women's lives are affected in disasters. And then after completing my PhD, I started working at Institute for Sustainable Futures, and I was part of different research about climate change adaptation, resilience, looking into climate change integration into programs. I work a lot with different NGOs, but yes, my passion was always looking into gender and climate change and the nexus of it, the different intersectionality and how women are differently affected, disproportionately affected in climate change and disasters. So yes, Shifting the Power Coalition, when I heard about it for the first time, because I come from Bangladesh, and then I didn't know a lot about Pacific region when I started working at ISF. But when I first heard about Shifting the Power Coalition, I was instantly intrigued by the work the coalition was doing, which was women-led organizations trying to build resilience in the community and trying to bring changes in their lives as well. So it was a very interesting project for me. And yeah, I started following different progress of Shifting the Power Coalition since 2021. But then finally, I got a chance to work with the coalition members in 2023. So as Caroline was saying, I was part of the project called Economics of Acting Early project, which was funded by Australia Pacific Climate Partnership. And the task was to look into how different anticipatory action initiatives have this cost benefit, have this economics benefit, how they are contributing to saving, saving finances. So basically, the point was to think about having more anticipatory action initiatives so that the loss and damage are reduced. So that's what we were looking into. So as one of the case study, we went to Vanuatu and worked with ActionAid Vanuatu to understand how Women with Weather program is financially benefiting, how it's reducing loss and damage. But what we found is it's not only economic benefit, that was not the highlight for me, even though it was actually causing economic benefit because of Women with Weather program. Women were actually informed early and they could take early actions, which actually actively saved lives and reduced loss and damage. women and men, like community members, could retrofit their houses, could save their crops, and this is how they reduce their damage. But what was more interesting for me was looking into how this program was actually bringing change in the community as well. So the program was basically was actually empowering women. The mobile set they received as part of the program is actually giving them the authority, the power, and a voice to be visible in front of the whole community. So it was not only economic benefit of the program, but it was also the non-economic, the social benefit of the program that was actually a very interesting understanding, at least from my perspective, from coming from a gender climate change background. It was really interesting for me, and which made it to the report ultimately, which was published last year in February. And yeah, you're welcome to have a look in the case study where we talked about both economic and non-economic benefit. So as continuation of that, this year we were actually doing an impact assessment for these 3 countries, looking into how this program is bringing different outcomes for the women and the community. What are the enabling factors that are driving this program, and also what are the priorities to strengthen and accelerate the program in the future? So we were looking into 3 things this year, and it's still a work in progress, but yeah, we have some emerging findings which I'd like to discuss today. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce my research team, my wonderful research team, and I'm not speaking on my own, I'm speaking on behalf of my team today. So we had Jessamine Davies, who's the project director of the research. Maybe you have seen her yesterday. She did a wonderful workshop yesterday as well. So she's a senior research consultant at Institute for Sustainable Futures. And then me, and then Lisa Ferroa. She is a local consultant from Vanuatu. She has been a country manager in Oxfam Vanuatu for a long time, and then she's doing consultancy. And I got the opportunity to work with Lisa in Vanuatu back in May this year. And then we have Lilu Muala. She is a consultant from Tonga, and Jessie and Lilu worked together in Tonga in May as well. And then also we have Melissa in this room. She also provided us expert advice on the whole process, the data collection, analysis, and report writing. So yeah, so Melissa was part of that as well. So yeah, before I dive deep into what was the findings, I'd like to do a little bit of overview of what we did. Since I'm a researcher, I have this immense passion for approach and methods and how the research was made rigorous. I'm just going to bore you a little bit about the approach. So we took these 5 principles in our research. So our research aimed to be empowering. So what we did, we tried to have this participatory strengths-based approach so that the research empowers each other. For example, we designed the research question, we drafted the sub-questions, etc., but we had a sense-making workshop with our local partners, the local partners from 3 countries. Also, Caroline was present, ActionAid Australia was present. So just to have that conversation, like what are the research questions looking good? Are they contextual? How can we make it more tailored for different countries? So we had this conversation. We try to make our research reciprocal, try to ensure that the research is beneficial to everyone, to the local partners and all the participants. For example, we are at the end of our research, but we are having a sense-making workshop with all the partners so that we can go through the priorities, which is the findings, and then just to hear from them, do they think it's worth make it to the report, or what else could be added, what's their priorities, etc. So yeah, we try to be reciprocal. We took a feminist and intersectional approach, which means that we try to make Pacific women's experience the center of the research, and that's where the independent consultants based in Pacific came in. We took their insights and knowledge, and also all the local partners were discussed throughout the research process before before going to the field, or before while being in the the countries, we try to accommodate all their insights and knowledge. Also, while we were in the community, we asked the community members, the women, how they would like to be approached. Is it okay for them if we take this approach to one-on-one conversation or storytelling approach? What's their priority? So yeah, we try to have that lens so that everyone feels safe and everyone feels it's a safe environment to share their views. And then we had this solidarity across scales approach, which was basically having that space for everyone to share their views. So for example, in our research, it was not only community members, it was different people, different stakeholders. For example, people from subnational agencies, national agencies, private sector who are involved. So everyone we took interviews, we involved everyone, so we get a holistic perspective. Also, we are thinking about reaching in different scales as well. So we have reports. We had an output which was presented in the global platform back in, I think, last month in Switzerland. But then we are also making pamphlets for local partners and also for community members so that every different stakeholders know about the research outputs and be informed. And lastly, strong and equitable partnerships. So we had a great understanding and partnership with Shift in the Power Coalition, ActionAid Australia, ActionAid Vanuatu. So it was a very good, safe place and enjoyable place to do research with. And yeah, so as you can understand, like we are doing a panel together, so we really had a very equitable, interesting partnership and successful one. So I'll just very quickly go through the process. So what we did is, as I say, like we did some data collection, we had different approaches, but before that we did a document review to understand the backgrounds, and you also got the background from Flora and Caroline, and also from the videos and Carol as well. So we did the document review just to have that background and prompt us to think more and maybe what we could focus on while in the countries. So that was the first step. And then in the data collection phase in the country, we took different approaches to involve different stakeholders. For example, in Vanuatu, while I was there, we did Talanoa sessions, and I heard from my research team members that they also took Talanoa approach in Bougainville and Tonga to involve women. And it was mostly like for those who are not very well known about Pacific research approach. So Talanoa is a storytelling approach. So we sat together in a circle, and then everyone talked about different things, and it was more like a very informal way of sharing their experiences and life stories with each other. So it did not felt like we are doing actual research, not like writing and typing. It was more like a very relaxed place where we all shared our views together. We also did some interviews. So at some places, like for example, women with disabilities or single mother, they had some things to say which they wanted to say by themselves and not within the group. So in that case, we had one-on-one interviews. We interviewed different government agency officials. We interviewed Digicel representatives who are the private sector partner of the local partners. So we interviewed different stakeholders as well. And then finally, sense-making workshop with the local partners just to validate our findings and listen from them and have their insights in the report as well. So that was the research process. Moving on, I think, as I mentioned, our research looked into three things. One is the outcomes of the women and the community, the enabling factors, and lastly, the priorities. So I think I thought that I'll focus on enabling factors and priorities more because you already heard from Flora and Carol and Caroline about the outcomes quite a lot, but I think I'd like to mention because I was there in the field and I'm coming from outside, not within the organization, but I think the outcomes were really interesting in a way, as I mentioned, the social benefits and just understanding like how a women-led multi-hazard early warning system is not only increasing disaster preparedness, or not only strengthening resilience, but also having that changing the social dynamics, bringing positive change in the community. That's also, I think, is very empowering and very interesting. I will not go in detail in the outcomes. I think I'll jump into the enabling factors and then priorities. So we have some enabling factors that we found from our research, which actually influence the women-led multi-hazard early warning system in the Pacific. And the first one is the coordination mechanism that is in place at grassroots levels and in national levels. So at grassroots levels, the coordination mechanism is quite well established and strong, specifically for Vanuatu, because as Caroline was saying, that in Vanuatu, the program is has progressed quite a bit than the other countries, and the other countries slightly different approach, but they're also in the process of making that progress. So say, for example, in Vanuatu, Women Weta program runs through WIT, Women I Talk Together network, which Flora already mentioned, and that network is quite strong and quite extensive, and they are quite well coordinated. And when we spoke to the network women, it seemed like they already did quite a bit of early warning system process that way, and they're quite confident that what's the process, what to do, what could be the challenges. So that coordination mechanism is in place at the grassroots level, and it seemed like we didn't do like all the places the Women Vatam program is there, but like the place I visited, they felt like yes, they know their job, and the mechanism is working quite well. So that was the enabling factor, like having that network, having that coordination mechanism is actually helping the program to reach and to get that success that they are aiming for. We also learned that there is one of the thing is that presence in the government, like there is this national disaster risk management coordination mechanism are in place as well. For example, Flora was talking about the cluster system. So in Vanuatu, they have this cluster, and as far as I know, Flora is part of the cluster, so she's a member there. And similarly, Talitha Project in Tonga, they're also part of their cluster, the disaster management cluster. So through the cluster, they can get the information and then they can disseminate. So being part of the cluster, this mechanism is also enabling the program to work or to have that impact that they're aiming for. I think another thing that we found is different emerging partnerships. So as I was saying, Digicel is the private sector partner. Digicel is the mobile network telecommunication company in the 3 countries, and they are the private sector partner in Vanuatu, Tonga, and Bougainville. And this partnership is actually enabling the multi-hazard early warning system in the Pacific. So I talked to one of the official from Digicel in Vanuatu, and just to get the how it works. So they have a structure in place, and as part of the partnership between ActionAid Vanuatu and Digicel, they provide mobile sets to women in the community every year, and they have a subsidized charge for those mobile sets. So this is a process where Digicel is, they are passionate about bringing that social benefit through their corporate work. And this partnership is actually enabling because of, the changed, because of the subsidized charge and all these processes actually enabling the program itself. There are some government partnerships in place as well. Say, for example, again, I'm giving Vanuatu's example because I was there and it's a little bit progress, so I can give you some more solid evidence. So ActionAid Vanuatu has relationship with different government agencies, for example, National Disaster Management Office and Vanuatu Meteorology and Geohazard Department. So that these partnerships are actually enabling the ActionAid Vanuatu or Women Weta program to get the information, get the early warning on time, and then disseminate in the community. Not only that, through these relationships, what ActionAid Vanuatu is doing, what I heard, that they are actually bridging the gap between the network, between the communities and the government agencies. For example, what we heard that I talked to some women in the community. They actually visited the VMGD, the Vanuatu Meteorology and Geohazard Department in Port Vila, in the capital city. So they went there. They talked to the government people. So they know, like when they receive the message, they know where is it coming from. And it's a huge change because it actually gives the women trust. Like we visited there, we saw that it's a scientific process, and if I'm getting the information, it's right, and I need to act fast. So that's kind of relationship. It was not only like between the hub, like the Women with the hub in the Port Vila and government agencies. It was also bridging the gap and bringing the women in the villages or in the network living in the community to that place as well. So that partnership was also making effective impact in the community through those partnerships. And finally, civil society partnerships. So in PNG, we found that there are different faith-based organizations who worked very closely with community-based disaster risk management, which is a community-driven agency. So they work very closely, and they actually work with Bougainville Women's Federation, who are driving the multi-hazard early warning system in Bougainville at this moment. So they work with them as well. So this is the connection, like different civil society organizations coming together and driving the program. So yeah, these were the enabling factors that's actually driving women-led multi-hazard early warning system in the 3 countries. And I'll move on to the next thing, which is the priorities for future, which is very important because all the works are great and very interesting and sounds very empowering. But yeah, we need to build keep the momentum, or we need to think about what's next, how to sustain it, because to be honest, all these programs, a lot of them, like the women, they are very passionate, but what's next? How to sustain it? The mobile sets, they need money. All these things need money and resources and all effort. So what's next? How to make it more sustainable and more successful in the future? So what we found is having a twin track approach. So as we all understand, and as even in the evidences, in the literature, in our lived experience, we know that women are disproportionately affected and women are not represented adequately in policy level as well. So the twin track approach is very important for the future. So what's that? Basically is thinking about investing in 2 ways. One is direct partnerships with, women-led organizations, specifically for thinking about women and girls, like CBDRM, involving women in CBDRM, community-based disaster risk management agencies, etc. Another one is investing in women's leadership, gender equality, and women empowerment initiatives. So it should be a 2-way, twin-track approach. One is thinking about inclusion in all these agencies related to DRR and climate change, and also thinking about empowering women, thinking about reducing gender discrimination through different initiatives. So that twin track approach is important. Number 2 that we found and heard so many times is formalizing and resourcing, because a lot, as I mentioned, this women-led program is through a bunch of passionate people, passionate women living in the community, passionate women working in the NGO sector, or passionate people working in the government agencies. But it needs to be formalized, it needs to be structured. For example, maybe having an MOU with government agencies, with with the organizations, with the local partners, this could help to keep the momentum, because if it's like one person doing everything out of passion and this person can leave or move for different reasons, maybe the system can collapse. So it is very important to formalize so that the program is sustainable in the future as well. Next up is thinking about enhancing capacity building of grassroots women's networks. At this moment, when we talked in Vanuatu, Tonga, and Bougainville as well, there has been different capacity building activities, some training, different workshops, and this has been very empowering and brought positive changes in the women's lives. And this needs to be done in a continuous manner, and also maybe thinking about scaling it up a little bit, thinking about how to reach different women of different ages or experience, and how to make them aware of disaster risk reduction or resilience in different ways. So thinking about it. And then lastly is increasing collaboration. So there has been a lot of successful collaboration, but more could be done, especially thinking about inclusiveness. We heard from women I talked to together, Sunshine Wing, which is a wing for women with disabilities, that they are doing a lot of transformative things in their community, but still some people, like some women, cannot read the messages because of different impairments. So thinking a little bit more about inclusiveness through increasing collaboration. And this collaboration could be done even cross-country, like learning from each other, from Vanuatu's experience to Tonga to Bougainville, so learning from each other as well. So yeah, so this is another priority that we thought should be practiced or should be think about in the future for better outcomes and better impact from this program. So I think I finished all my slides. Oops, within time. So I'll hand over to Caroline. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you so much, Desrina, for that overview. I know it's just an overview, but I feel like we went through the whole process of doing the impact assessment and what we can expect once it's finalized and released. And I thought maybe before we go into Q&A, I'd throw this back to Flora and Carol, if perhaps they wanted to respond to some of the findings and priorities that Desrina has highlighted that's come out of the impact assessment and the previous research. So I'm opening the floor first to Flora and Carol for any questions or comments, additional comments they might have. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I can't hear anything, so I'm just going to assume that.
I'm giving space to Flora to start.
Okay. Thank you, Mama Carol. I think for me, woman-led community-based, the woman with the early warning system, the one that we had was very unique, contextualized, and we own it. It's not that we just adapt, but I think the ownership of it makes it to where it is today. And the partnership that we built, the relationship that we have forged over the journey of the early warning system, it wasn't easy ride in the path, but it comes with its challenges. But we've learned to cope all those challenges. And also the first research that we did, I think it was one of the first research that we tried to include all the women in the community, even our students at the universities here to assist with us when we're doing the early warning, the cost of economics of acting early. And that comes out good. And we've seen Tazrina then. So when Tazrina came back, she was no stranger. She was a sister who comes in right through, and she works with us really well. And I think the approach that the university, also UTAs, took was a very appropriate approach to come to us and then from us to the community. and we work alongside really well. So I think I'd like to say thank you to UTS as well to produce this wonderful report.
Okay, I'll take after Flora. There are a few things that the research has brought which reinforces or confirms some of our own initial assessments into what next and what needs to be strengthened. We do realize from these programs that the cost of technology doesn't come cheap, and that we are able to do what we are doing now because we are donor funded. And we've been asking ourselves the question, what if DFAT does not fund tomorrow? And I'm saying that because like the funds that we gave to the women have gotten old. We have gone 2 or 3 times, and that's because DFAT is funding. So we are at a stage where we are thinking deeply around sustainability. We are working out triangular approach where these same women are introduced to livelihood programs, but also talking to our partner Digicel on a business model that can enable these women to buy their own handsets and have money in their pockets at the end of the day. With this, recently when I attended a few sessions at the Global Platform on DRR, I asked myself a question. The governments were talking early warning is essential, we need to start it. But I personally, as Carol, unless I save money, I'm not able to buy a smartphone because it's $1,000 plus, the phone that I need to use. My lobbying question for this team and where we go in our different spaces is that the economic agreements with countries, technology for women need to be thought through. Don't give them the Bamba, as you call it in Kenya. Bamba is that small phone, Android, you cannot even send WhatsApp messages on, and said now we've reduced for women. We need proper handsets, but cost-effective that can be affordable by that woman who lives in Tonga, by that woman who lives in Bougainville, by that woman who lives in Vanuatu. The second thing is that we are working well towards building the relationship with the climate services. It is a process. It's been long term. Again, I am saying how our programs are designed and donor expectation. There are some things that bilateral arrangements can facilitate, and that we need to have a conversation, whereas Australia funds directly climate services in some of these countries, this should be part of the core business. And earlier in an earlier session, somebody asked about government accountability to do certain things. We must come to terms that in some of these spaces, there are people who are very gender blind and don't understand the intricate details of women's rights and women's issues. And so that's where we have a role to play, and that's where Women in Talk Together, America Information, and Tonga Win comes into play. Finally, building a movement is not easy. These women don't have time to sit with you the whole day for 5 days. And so the refresher trainings are critical for them, building their capacity to understand the various components. And this is a comprehensive approach. So the multi-hazard early warning system does not sit alone somewhere. It comes as a comprehensive approach, looking at the detail around women's leadership and agency in humanitarian action, women's leadership and agency in climate adaptation and resilience, and women's leadership on disaster risk reduction and anticipatory action. And I think we need to have the second tier to this conversation should lead to that. I'll stop because, you know, when it comes to, even if you wake me up at 2 a.m., I'll start talking until 6.
Yes, Carol, that's why we have you on this panel. But thank you so much for sharing your feedback on that. And thank you again, Tazrina, for the insight into the research. We're now going to open up for Q&A, and this part of our panel discussion is going to be moderated by Mel, who's in the room with all of you. And so I'm handing over to everyone in the room for your Q&A for our panelists.
Any questions in the room? Whereabouts? Oh.
Thank you so much for that, sharing all that experience and the whole process. Been really informative. So my question is actually, so with the distribution of mobile phones, what were the challenges that you faced, especially considering this is a positive disruption, but I believe that it would also alter the power dynamics within the community because there are cases where such dynamics have led to GBV and such. So I would like to know the challenges that these countries have faced, if there were any. Thank you.
Who'd like to take that one first? Flora? Yeah, go Flora.
Thank you for the questions. Yes, now let me just say that I think the first handset we took we put it into the community was 10. We first take 10 handset. 2018, I remember very well. Now, this Android, they are very smartphones. They're smartphones. And some of the women that had the phone never hold one of that phone. They only had brick phone. So like the Nokia type brick phone, that's the smaller, the button one, but not all of them got brick phone. Only their husband have brick phone, but they don't have phones or any other communication device. Now getting them with the handset, we have to, I think we run probably 3 to 4 awareness session just for them to handle handset. And their first biggest fear is their husband. That's another barrier that we have to deal with. Because the husband now, they don't own the handset. Now it's the women who own the handset. And then you've got the age where the Facebook page that just, Facebook came into play. It just started. Now everybody was talking Facebook and, it was another new form of platform. But when the women had this, they didn't ask for those platforms. Because they only know green button and red button. Green to call or answer, and then red to close. So we have to go through the whole process on telling them, you go here, that's the app for you to put in phone numbers. You save it here. So it was a process to get them to understand. And then the issue that we have seen coming out was also, the man was also in there asking if they can utilize the phone. But we have strict rules when we give the handset to the women. 3 to 4 sessions just on phones, how you handle the phone. And why is it important that your husband shouldn't be the one touching the phone? Because the phone doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all the women that their phones have been connected to this phone. So you look after a whole phone tree, and that phone tree can be 100 to 200 women that you look after with your handset. And therefore, that handset is crucial just for you to call for emergency, get early warning messaging. Gender-based violence doesn't really arise with them on the phone. One of them usually keeps it locked away. When I was calling her, she said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I couldn't get you because I locked my phone in my suitcase. Why? Because I'm scared somebody would steal from me. So, because it's a new device, something new that the women have. The challenge wasn't gender-based violence, but for them was fear of losing it because it's the model is too expensive for them to use. It was an expensive handset, but it was the handset that we need to use for the early warning to actually reach everybody. So we don't have some challenges around that when we started to give. Now that's 2018. When we look at 2023, 24, 25, we started to hear now there's challenges, but the women are already on top of the game. No one touches the phone unless you were asked to, probably hand it over. And the password was only meant for the women. No one else in the family knows. So there's strict rules when we give handset, but it doesn't ignite or start conflict. That we make sure of it.
If I can add something, Flora, the women asked us to give a small guideline. So Flora and the team worked on a kind of a terms of reference that women put in their bag. And so when they were asked, why can't we use the phone, they would do, and I'm remembering a few of them with their faces, they would give the write-up and say, read. You cannot use this phone, and that helped. The other thing that they also make fun, oh, you are telling us they will use the phone, and yet when their own phones ring, they give us, can you read what they have written in that message? Meaning that most of their husbands still depended on them to read the text messages on the phone.
That's good. Thank you. That was a great question to get some of those reflections on that. Any other questions? We're running out of time, unfortunately. So we might have just a quick answer if anyone has a final question for our panelists.
I'll try framing this for the Pacific context. For the women's institutions, the WWW one, and all the other countries, how have they been perceived within the community, especially in the grassroots, in terms of, are they seen as a part of all the other grassroots organizations that are available? And if so, how are you able to gain that acceptance? And if not, what can you do to gain that acceptance within the grassroots organizations or groups, I guess?
I'll take it from Marigat information, because I got the opportunity to start it up with them. And we did not, the thought leadership was actually provided by themselves. The role that we play on the background is technical, but they're the ones who said on set, we asked them, what is it that we can do within the shortest time? COVID was lethal. And they said, if we could do what we have with women, wet and weather, and even naming the mechanism was done by themselves. So your question is, yeah.
They were able to be formed in the various countries, but were there already maybe a men's institution or a youth group or other women's group? And how are they? This is mainly for sustainability in the event that ActionAid's project ends. How will they fit into the fabric of the community that they're living in?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to use different terminology. Okay. The organizations, the collectives we work with are local women's collective. So Bougainville, it is not us who started. We found them. And so we use that avenue to collaborate with them. Tonga, Talitha, we found them. So we collaborate. It is only Vanuatu that we nurtured the starting up of Women in Talk Together. And as I speak to you, last year, in November, we launched a federation. They're independent, they're building their own thing, but does not mean that they do not collaborate with other male-led, youth-led organizations. They do partner they identify the points of partnership, they partner with them. Yeah, so it is women-led, but they also do strategic partnership with various organizations. Yeah.
Carolyn, did you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to also very quickly, through the Young Women's Program of the Shifting the Power Coalition, when we started talking about early warning systems, we also wanted to make sure that, we were connecting our young women's network into these different spaces as well. So in 2021, when everything was locked down, there was an online training, there was an online training between the Young Women's Network and the Bureau of Metrology here in Fiji. After that training, the young women took back to their communities what they had learned from these different stakeholders. And the feedback that we got post-community discussions was that the chiefs in those local villages up in the Northern Division at Fiji had started to invite the young women into the decision-making spaces of those traditional structures to be able to share back what was being said, what they were learning from these different spaces, and how they could shape the disaster management plans of their own communities. Now, things have changed over the couple of years in that the Fiji partner that we were working with is no longer in the picture, but we do know from context on the ground that the work has continued. As Carol had said, we're just there to facilitate the technical aspect of the work that they're doing, but they're already building the structures to enable the young women who are in that space to lead the discussions, to lead the development of these disaster management plans. It's now how we go back to those communities to support and invest in the leadership of those young women to continue the work. Because the risk work that we've started to do when we engage in a partner or community is to look at how we keep the movement that they've developed sustainable beyond the lifespan of our contracting with our donors, and how do we get the resources and funnel them into the places that we need to be. In the early stages of the work around FemLink Pacific, we were operating with no money, but we wanted to invest and scale up the work that they were doing, which enabled us to be able to adapt that system into the different country partners that we have as well. I'm just I've just been told that we're a little bit over time, so I'm gonna hand back to Mel, but I just wanted to say that we do have partners who are there in the room with you, who can share with you our contact information so that we can continue this learning offline as well. Please just signal to Q and to Carol. Auntie Carol, thank you very much for your patience. If you have any more questions, but we do have source material as well to share with you should you require additional information from the work that we've done as the coalition.
Wonderful. Thank you. If we can all just give a very warm appreciation to our panelists today. We have an amazing panel of feminists doing really powerful work in the Pacific that's really transforming how we respond, particularly women and their communities, to a climate change future. So thank you so much, ladies. It's wonderful to see you, and all the best with the continuing work out there in the Pacific, and we love what you're doing. So thank you all. It is now morning tea. If you wanted to head out, that one too. It's afternoon tea, so please head out and grab some refreshments. And if you do want to use the Wova app, you can contact any of our speakers through that for the rest of the day as well, and hopefully catch up. So thanks, everyone.